welcome everybody. This has been a really great discussion so far, really rich panels and discussions. And I think everything that I'll be saying in the next 40 minutes or so broadly reinforces the types of discussions that's already happened at this conference, which is very exciting. So yes, the title here is Model Risk Management in the Age of AI. I'll talk about what an enterprise AI architect is a little later, if you're not familiar with that title and role. I think the thing to think about with this, kind of the main message to take away is, recapitulating a lot of what's already been said, which is AI initiatives are having a tremendous impact on existing model risk management processes and programs. But there's also a real opportunity for model risk management as an enterprise function to have a important value-adding impact to AI initiatives, more broadly speaking. So it is challenges, but I think model risk management is in many ways in a very unique position for many of the reasons that have been talked about in panels and discussions so far, to have a very, very positive impact on the increased investment in AI initiatives that organizations are making. My company, ModelOps, has been primarily focused in helping very large organizations, financial services institutions specifically, but not exclusively, kind of incorporate AI initiatives into the broader business framework in a way that, adds both the value and mitigates much of the risk. So let me just start with what's happening. I mean, in 2021, it's pretty exciting. Most of our customers, for example, large financials, have been investing, as many of the panelists have talked about, in AI initiatives, for 5 years or more in a very serious way. So as everyone knows, AI is not like a science project anymore. It's real. Models that are coming out of AI initiatives are impacting decisioning processes. And the benefit in 2021 is really that there's a lot of research, there's a lot of people talking, just like this conference, talking about their experience over the last few years. So the ramp time to really evolving a model risk management function and a general enterprise functions to more gracefully handle AI, the rapid increase in AI initiatives. This is something that you can learn about much easier today in 2021 than you could even a year ago, even 2 years ago. So it's certainly something that's evolving quickly. Gartner, as I think you know, is a leading analyst firm that has published a lot, very close to a lot of the organizations that have been represented in this conference, as well as colleagues and across different industries. I point you to something they just published in January, which is their model operations, security and trustworthiness framework, their MOST framework, and the top 5 priorities of managing AI risk, which they published. And, I think the message here is, again, highlighted from what's already been spoken, which is just next year. So this is not like, this is what we're talking about. Just next year, they predict 15% of folks in your organizations who have AI initiatives that they're using AI technology to drive real decisioning will face board level investigations. That's certainly been happening in our customer base. We can see it. This trend line seems a very reasonable type of prediction. I'll let the modelers decide whether it's 15% or 20% or 10%, but certainly board level investigations is happening. And only in 3 years, they predict, hey, the more you have a real AI risk management control function, you will have better outcomes than you would if you can. This almost seems like a tautology, but I think the main message there is we all have been involved in very large organizations. For most of us at this conference, or at least very diversified organizations, it takes multiple years to get serious capabilities off the ground to be operating. So if 2024, if we're looking at 3 years out to have twice as good of outcomes for AI initiatives, now's the time to invest. This is not something to push off. And this leads right to the last point, which is it 50%, is it 40%, is it 70% of all AI use cases will be assessed for risk? And that talks about the second piece, which I think came up in the panel. While risk management is traditionally been driven by, you know, some internal audit controls and many external regulatory controls, AI's acceleration of modeling as decisioning assets into the general decisioning framework means that risk management becomes an even more high profile function than it is today. But then has to kind of cope with the different challenges going forward. So what does this mean for risk management? Well, first is to think about risk management as even broader than kind of the to-date internal risk focus or external regulatory focus, maybe more on you know, financially centered models, but across all models, as we see across all business use cases, AI initiatives are actually having a real impact. So these models, and these could be machine learning models, these could be even an increase or a reuse of traditional models in machine learning kind of contexts. And there was a discussion in the panel about ML models used for model risk assessment. That's yet another level of complexity, but certainly linguistic models, graphical models. There's just a lot of models, and there are more and more of those. So, and they're being used across the different business issues. And so how do we have controls established and enforced? Well, this is what model risk management's for, right? So it's just, hey, done, we're done. But as we've talked about before, there are real challenges given the complexities of these, and we'll talk about these challenges, but in the end, what does good look like? We should be able to control and establish and enforce risk across all model types if this is going to have a real impact on the wide adoption of AI initiatives. And certainly that crosses into the AI initiatives, the model building itself. So, and this also came up in the panel. How can we bring these risk management requirements into the earliest phases of model development and AI initiatives? And I think that kind of organizational alignment is both the challenge and the opportunity for model risk management professionals in large organizations. If you take away anything, it's model risk management in the age of AI will be more difficult, and I'll talk about some specific examples from our experience, but also more impactful to the enterprise journey. And that means more responsibility in terms of organizational alignment and more accountability, of course. So what makes this hard, right? Hey, we have model risk management. We had it for a long time. You know, AI models are just other kinds of models. You know, can't we just, you know, do what we've been doing, but make a few changes? So in our experience, you know, the biggest pitfalls that larger organizations fall into for incorporating AI initiatives into existing model risk management programs is an underestimation of how hard that is, and an overestimation of the existing capabilities' ability to provide risk management for AI initiatives in the fullness of time. That, you know, so underestimating how hard it is and kind of overestimating current capabilities has been the biggest pitfall in terms of making, you know, avoiding some of the biggest challenges. And so these three areas in terms of managing enterprise risk in the age of AI are things to attend to, right? First, and they may be obvious. What our experience is, they're usually obvious in the organization. Somebody knows these mostly, but there needs to be richer discussions around them. And so this is kind of some of the things to attend to. First is just the sheer complexity of these models. AI models, unlike traditional models, are subtended by technology. And as we all know, whether it's software, data, automation, anything that's subtended by technology tends to have exponential impact over time because technology is getting, you know, more, it's easier to acquire technology exponentially through cost and other things and availability. So what that means is that compared to traditional model-centric decisioning, there's really an exponential growth in the number of models, the types of models, the tools and platforms. And there are so many types. I mean, you know, you may have organizations that have, you know, obviously it had SAS, traditional modeling platform, but now have SageMaker and Dataiku and Data Robot and And we don't see any slowdown in that. The availability of modeling technology is getting exponentially easier to acquire, exponentially easier to use, like all technologies, all digital technologies. And so the number of models is just exploding. And so to be able to ask the question, given that explosion of what's the state of the models, where are they, who are they, where they come from, is itself very challenging. As we heard from the regulator, regulatory risk provides yet another kind of challenge in that where traditionally regulatory risk might have driven a lot of model risk management function, now there's the technology is evolving so quickly, there's some a bit of a fog about how the regulatory landscape might look, next year and 3 years. And so it's already hard to think about systematic, automated, risk management processes. We've been working on that in the risk management, MRM, model risk management frameworks for a long time. But now when regulatory risk itself has a lot of uncertainty, to be able to flexibly change that as the regulatory environment changes becomes, competitive, becomes operationally significant, and especially to be able to, as was talked about in the panel, have auditability and reproducibility of everything that happens to these models, everything, because these models, as many of you know, can be very, very sensitive to small perturbations in, say, just a library that's used, or who exactly approved this to run in exactly this place. So both the business requirements and the technical requirements of auditability are increased, and with increased regulatory uncertainty, the ability for a flexible way to manage that becomes kind of paramount. And then finally, the cost, the business aspect of this is beyond regulatory in a sense, and beyond even the traditional internal governance, that if AI initiatives are going to continue to create assets, models that make decisions across almost every strata of the organization, which is certainly the direction it's heading, and inclusive of being able to, as was brought up in the panel previous, be able to tie into expert opinion, right, in terms of approval and override, right? We don't want to throw out our experts. We want to augment the decisioning capability with models and be able to integrate that in a very rigorous way to kind of expert controls and other things, but have that all be auditable. That seems like an enterprise need driven internally, not so much driven simply from the external pressures of regulatory risk, or maybe a few internal pressures like brand, safety and those types of things. So if AI is going to continue to have an increasing role, then governing and monitoring AI models becomes an enterprise function that's really of its own accord. It's about AI initiatives, and the ability to handle regulatory challenges or monitor internally should just be there, period. And then, we can easily, if the regulatory landscape changes, we can change that. Okay, so all those things challenging, and I think, again, many of you have already probably been involved with initiatives and maybe centers of excellence and kind of groups that come together and say, okay, yeah, that all seems, reasonable, but how do we solve it? How do we solve it? And what we've found is, and even in the light of a lot of visibility, Gartner still calls the AI gap, a large percentage of models are not being managed for risk, or are not getting deployed in a way that takes into account an auditable trail of how exactly got there. So what is the solution? In our experience, there's two things organizationally that have been kind of the aha moments. And the first is the title of the slide. It's, and this community, model risk management, knows this better than really any other function in the organization. It's about the models. That of course, the models all we want to be able to prevent risk. In the age of AI, we need to be able to remediate them quickly because of the uncertain shelf life of these models. And obviously be able to visualize risk and concerns to a broader audience. And all of those revolve around what Gartner increasingly calls ModelOps, or AI model operations, right? But it's each model may have a very different relationship to business processes and technical processes to do that, as again was brought up in the panel. Some models might have heavy regulatory control requirements. Some may have lighter ones. Some may have more internal requirements. Some may be very sensitive and require a specific type of fairness and ethical requirements. So by making the model, the concrete model, the organizing principle, that in our experience, nothing other than that can move the conversation forward faster. Talk about specifics. It's this model. Where is it going in the decisioning process? Exactly how would we even detect risk, factors, and how would we prevent them? What has to happen from a remediation perspective? So being very, very concrete about the model and embracing the diversity of models. Models aren't like, in this way, models are not like software. They certainly have software components. And this is one of the ways I mentioned before that organizations sometimes underestimate the challenge or overestimate their own ability. Even if an organization is very good at delivering software, software tends to have quite a lot of pattern to it. There are quite a lot of economies of scale with respect to process. But models, as you know, as this community knows better than anybody, comes from proprietary data or insights, is making absolutely proprietary and critical business decisioning, has outcomes that go right into business decisioning. Models are enterprise assets that are not, they're different than software, they're different than data, they're different than other enterprise assets. They have a very, very special role. So making the models themselves the organizing principle for an operational capability goes a long way in our experience for getting organizational alignment. So as an example, that means the model life cycle, that how a model relates to both business processes and technical processes should be something that everyone can look at, something like a document, which would be great if you could actually load that into a system and kind of shepherd the model through a process, which may include manual approvals, it may include handoffs to other processes, right? This is not kind of simply machine automatable. It's certainly but it's documented, it's rigorous, it's discoverable. So in the middle of this slide is like a little snippet from what we've seen, like things like this is a business process notation, BPMN 2.0 to be specific, which is a rigorous business process notation where each box may have different stages that a model has to go through. In this case, it kind of calls out track, compare, and remediate. And a model lifecycle like this might handle a whole class of models, but it's not a one size fits all for all models, but it's extremely flexible and changeable, but it's also rigorous and documentable. So having some sort of a model ops platform that allows the very concrete realities of a model lifecycle to be examined. So you can take this document, and this, by the way, is what an enterprise AI architect could do and should do, is you have a model lifecycle, you take it to risk, you say, is this exactly how we should compare against specific thresholds? Is this exactly what we should do? No, we should do this, we should do that. You take it to DevOps and say, is this exactly the types of processes and software has to go through to be deployable in this particular cloud, et cetera, et cetera. So this becomes the concrete details that allow for the operational capability to go forward very kind of smoothly. And the main message to this group is the model risk management group, things that you know well, things like population score stability and characteristic stability. These are things that actually all AI initiatives can benefit from greatly. And you probably already know this, but within the organization, there's not always an understanding of things that model risk management has been doing for, a decade in the new emerging AI data science. So there's a real opportunity for model risk management to add a tremendous amount of governance value to general model operations with respect to AI, and also ensure that the model risk management processes can handle the wide variety, both technically and kind of from a model perspective and complexity of the model. So there's a real opportunity here for model risk management to have a huge impact on model operations more broadly. On the right of the slide, I almost hesitate to give this kind of slide. It's like mom and dad, like, okay, you have to have processes and technology and people, and they all have to integrate together. Kumbaya. Of course. Like everybody has those kinds of things. But what I think is unique about the AI initiatives are these models, as MRM function knows well, really has, compared to software, data, and other assets that require the kind of integration of process technology and people, models have a really uniquely cross business and technology demands, especially AI initiative-based models. The technology demands are serious and hard, and the business demands become even more complex with things like ethical and fair, the complexity of the models drives challenges in the business demands and then to make it all discoverable and auditable, exactly where did this model go in its life cycle, requires a very unique alignment of process technology and people with respect to delivering the business outcomes. Like, are we actually, unlike traditional modeling, which has traditionally been in a business unit, and kind of stays in the business unit. Now, the amount of investment in AI initiatives in general means that the business wants better visibility, right? And now if this places the risk teams even more accountable to business, is not just about regulatory pressure, but something more fundamental. And of course, the technology. And so there will be both data science, well, all three, data science, technology, and risk teams pointing at each other if something goes wrong. So the more alignment there is, the more discoverable it is, then obviously the more success you'll have, per Gartner, on having good outcomes for, auditable message and not be facing a challenging inquiry down the line. So I want to kind of zoom out now because, and this kind of is the question, this slide talks about the very natural question of where does operational accountability, including risk, sit in the organization. And again, this is what Gartner has been publishing. They have probably published in the last 6 to 9 months, 4 to 6 research papers on what they call ModelOps, which is a operational capability that is answerable to the life cycles, the full lifetime of models in operation. So this is an operational capability, and their relationship to existing functions. So on this slide, you can kind of look on the left of the slide are what they call model factories. Some people call it the data science function or the AI model building function or the analyst function. And this is also where traditional modeling fits into there, even expert-based models or even human, a call out to a human and say, do you approve this? Do you not approve this? But model factories are increasingly where the AI initiatives are making machine learning and other technology-driven models, data-centric models usually. And these could be anything from, as you see, like SageMaker, Dataiku, even the traditional platforms like SAS, Data Robot, and there's just an explosion of those. And of course, models in the AI sense are, even if they're traditional models, are they're software at some level. So they have to get delivered into the business. And so and they consume data and they output scores. So DataOps, DevOps, the cloud services, some models might run in a cloud because it has to be close to a consuming service. Some might run on-prem, et cetera. And then I've highlighted in green MRM services. So how do we actually manage those models? There's certainly a lot of understanding about, as we talked about risk management models, but in the broader sense, if every model coming out of every model factory has to be managed in some way, that means that some function of the model risk management services also has to be integrated into ModelOps. And so, and then of course, scores and inferences go to the consuming apps on the right. So the thing to note here is the organizational structure. Who owns this ModelOps capability? Well, in our experience, this really is some collaboration of risk and technology, because those are the two organizations that actually understand how to operate things day in, day out, 24/7, 7 days a week, quarter by quarter, year by year, and have the systems and technology discipline to evaluate whether something can be audited fully, whether it can be, you could say, here's exactly what happened. Here are all the approvals we can prove to you that it's gone through it. And it gives rise to two new roles. One are model operators, literally people, this would be similar or even come from the same as model risk management services, people who actually are, have a ModelOps platform and can say, answer those questions I put in the front. It's an operational role, much more like model risk management and IT or SecOps, not so much like DevOps and DataOps, which tend to focus on specific projects related to the building of models or the delivering of specific software. This is an operational day in, day out role. And then the kinds of things that have to happen, life cycle are the things in the middle. And much of that is already well understood by model risk management. So model risk management and technology, when they team up together to provide a rich ModelOps platform as defined by Gartners and others in the marketplace, tend to be able to reap the benefits of accelerated AI initiatives and greatly reduce risk on AI initiatives and much better visibility to guide kind of strategic investment going forward. So hopefully that kind of answers a little bit of the question of, is this all taken over by model risk management or somebody else? Well, in our experience, there's really a net new function that is heavily influenced by technology operations and model risk management as the two primary. And that has been very successful for several larger organizations, especially financial services. Okay, with that, I think there's one more survey question we have too, which is, who is responsible for ensuring model risk management controls are enforced for all AI and ML models? Is it the CIO? Is it the chief risk officer? Is it the head of the AI initiatives? Is it others? This is the organizational alignment question. I think from the poll, many of you have a lot of concrete experience actually deploying real AI initiative models from real AI initiatives and governing them at some level and managing risk specifically at some level. And, that's important. And if you're not on that journey yet, I would highly recommend get on the journey. Talk to your peers. This is the perfect place, this type of conference. You have so many practitioners with so much experience who are really done a lot of some of the most painful learnings have happened in the last 3 to 4 years. And now that's really available. So research and learn, read what's going on in Gartner, talk to your peers here. The good news about starting on your journey today is that there's just so much that has already been learned and published and discussed. And this conference itself is, a tremendous evidence of that. And so there's lots of resources out there. Talk internally, right? Even just taking the slide that I just showed you about organizational alignment and taking it around and people go, is this right? Do you think this? Is this how it should work? Just like I said before with a model lifecycle. Here's a model. Here's its lifecycle. Is this right? Take it to DevOps people. Is this right? Take it to model risk management. Is this right? Take it to data scientists, right? That kind of reaching out with very concrete ideas, really advances the conversation, the ability to invest in real solutions around model operations, including the risk, how to integrate risk management into it. I've been involved in enterprise technology consumption by large enterprises my entire career. I've never seen the kind of challenges that, in terms of organizational alignment that models have presented, which is, one of the reasons I'm talking to you here. And the key insight there is models don't fit some previous pattern. They absolutely are unique with respect to their AI initiative models. The newer class of models and the way models are being used in organization is unique in the combination of technical complexity, analytic complexity, and business accountability than any other asset seen before. So getting a conversation going internally, is just a must. You have to do it. And today in 2021, there are a lot of technologies, Gartner again can help sort through the landscape of that, but there are a lot of software tools. Our company has, we're a software company. We make a product called ModelOps Center, which is completely focused on providing this ModelOps capability for large diversified enterprises. There are others out there. This is a time where it's quite straightforward to research, evaluate, get POCs going, understand real capabilities of real model operations platforms. They're available today, they can be evaluated. And so that's not the way it was, 3 or 4 years ago. So that's an exciting development. In our experience, and what I think the market has been talking about now for the last few years, is really there has to be a very fundamental collaboration between the different aspects, the data science function, the technology function, and the risk management function, and the business function. And those need to be encoded in some meaningful way. And who owns it? Who is going to own a model operations platform going forward? That's for every organization to decide. But in our experience, some combination of CIO and chief risk officer seems to get the fastest acceleration for getting capabilities off the ground. We have a lot of resources on model operations in general at ModelOps.com, and we're here and we're available to answer any questions and talk to you. So thank you so much for your attention today. I hope anything from this, we're happy to be involved in your journey in any way. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We're at your disposal.